I have great interest in one particular female painter who was best friends with Marie Antoinette, and her name was Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun. And actually I'm considering writing a novel about her. She was a consummately good portraitist. Her drawing was marvelous, but she also had great good luck in her life. She was best friends with Marie Antoinette, and Marie Antoinette was quite unpopular in 1789, as you remember. We just celebrated Bastille Day, so I'm thinking of this. And this wonderful young woman painter who had become a very famous painter, painting the aristocracy of the Ancien Regime. She, of course, had one of these 18th century husbands who gambled away all of her earnings, which were considerable. He also spent her considerable earnings on various mistresses, which was considered normal in the 18th century in Europe. But she also had great good luck because in 1789 she got into a carriage with her little daughter Julie and left Paris, going to Rome before the revolution became a reign of terror. From then on, and of course Marie Antoinette lost her head, and the revolution went on and on and on, and the revolutionaries turned on each other as they always do and killed each other, guillotined each other, and the streets flowed with blood. But she went on to Rome, where she studied Renaissance painting, and then she became a court painter in Moscow to the czars, and eventually she wound up in Britain, where she painted the court. And after this long, long life of survival, she came back to France eventually and discovered that her style of painting was completely out of fashion and was derided and mostly forgotten as a painter. Now, because of the women's movement of the 70s, people are beginning to rediscover her.
How much?
What?
How much each painting?
I don't know what she goes for, but she's
I'm just following the kind of standard kind of question in Hong Kong.
She is fascinating to me because she lived through all the travails of an 18th century woman, and yet survived and painted and painted.
The only trouble with writing on somebody obscure is that it won't become a bestseller, perhaps.
It will under Erica's.
No, but I have never written for money. I write from my heart. I write what I need.
Only following the line of wrestling in Hong Kong.
Because I truly believe that we cannot predict future taste. That if we follow what we really are interested in, sometimes we're lucky and we have a huge hit, and sometimes the audience isn't interested. But I don't think
You've sold millions, but are you rich?
Probably not. They figured out every way not to pay authors.
The money is put to very good use.
Notice your earrings, sparkling.
Without 12 swans, my husband and I would not have been able to spend 12 years doing nothing except working on Mao.
Excellent.
So.
Okay, another question, please. Yes, yes. Rupert. Is it Rupert? Well, you have a fatter version of him.
The title says how, what and why do writers write, but how do you get over writer's block? What sort of disciplines do each of you have when you've got a project?
Right, stop. 1 minute. Every year we get this stupid question. Ask somebody else. I mean, it's such a stupid question. Next one. You're not going to win that book.
Can I ask an intelligent question? Have you ever met a more entertaining and aggressive host than Tim?
Of course people are writing this block. Of course different people respond in different ways. So I'm going to override that question. No, let's see whether the next one. Yeah, that one. Yeah, without the jacket. Yeah. Who? Is it a woman? Good. Let's have a woman.
We need a woman's question.
Yeah, we need a woman. Stand up, stand up. Woman, stand up. Just shout it out. Yes, that doesn't work.
Hi, because I'm a journalism student, I have a question to Mr. Shawcross. I'm really curious about your experience as a broadcaster as well, and which one do you think, by being on TV or publishing your own book, is more efficient or effective in communicating with the public or sharing your own thoughts?
Well, TV, obviously, you reach many, many more people. I mean, a book, if you're, the sorts of books I write, if you reach a few thousand people, you're very, very lucky. Jung and Erica have happier experience of reaching millions of people by their books. I wish I could find a subject that would enable me to do that. But television reaches a much broader audience, but it's much more superficial. And actually, the nice medium in between is radio. Radio, yes. You can talk very much more intelligent. Well, I don't want to sound intelligent, but I mean, talk much more discursively than you can on television. Television tends to be sound bites, and radio isn't always like that. But I enjoy writing books. But I like making films because it's fun going out with the film crew and seeing strange things and doing meetings.
I would like to say that as a result of one of your biographical subjects, Mr. Murdoch, the level of television has plummeted in London and New York.
I don't agree with that.
Okay. But in America, we have the Kardashian sisters, who are famous principally for their big butts. And Kim Kardashian came to the public's attention by doing a video of herself having sex with an extremely handsome black man. And this is the way people now get famous on television. And nobody who writes books has a prayer in them.
It's very sad for us.
Okay, another question. Yes, another lady, blonde lady.
David, don't say anything rude, okay?
She is Austrian. Be careful.
Yes. No, we're a very mild nation. Anyway, Mr. Shawcross, you asked our opinion, or Hong Kong's opinion, on the fear when the gentleman up there said, "Not yet." Mm-hmm. And I have lived in Hong Kong for over 50 years. My husband is Chinese. And I'm certainly no authority on the situation that we are facing, perhaps, I don't know, in when we go back to China as 50 years we've given leave. But I think Hong Kongers are not so much afraid of what China might do to Hong Kong, but I think China is very afraid how Hong Kong's ideas and spirit of independence and defiant stance on certain issues. I think that's what will perhaps be difficult to answer. We don't know what China might do to Hong Kong to stop us from our independent voice.
Well, that's fascinating, and Erica said before when we were talking in a smaller group that freedom is contagious, and a few minutes after that I was interviewed by a very clever young woman from the South China Morning Post called Andrea Chen, who's come from Beijing to work here for the South China Morning Post, and I think the infectious nature of Hong Kong is irresistible, and that's what's so marvelous about this place, and I'm sure you're right that it will have an effect on China, and that the nature of communications and digital communications are such that governments can never again hope to impose the massive control of information that was done by Stalin or by Mao. It's just that era is past. So I agree with you. I think Hong Kong is on the winning side.
Do you think that Hong Kong has a great deal of hope?
Well, I mean, yes, I mean, Hong Kong's freedom. Well, of course, Hong Kong publishes my books.
China, he banned all the books. but China is no poorer for it today. And of course there are lots of books which are banned. You collect banned books, and perhaps you might say a couple of things about banned books, where in fact books are not being able to be published.
Well, I mean, the book that you started out by talking about, Ulysses, 1922, was a book that people had to buy in Paris in an edition from the Olympia Press and bring in their suitcase to other parts of the world. It wasn't permitted to be published. There was a very long legal battle. Lady Chatterley's Lover was published in a tiny edition in Florence, D.H. Lawrence. You couldn't bring explicit sexual material into the United States for many, many years. And then through a long series of cases, you could finally bring Tropic of Cancer, Lady Chatterley's Lover, etc. And it was after the freeing of these books from censorship, which pretty much happened in the 60s in the US, that writers like John Updike and Philip Roth began to write about the sexual side of life from a man's point of view. Couples by John Updike was published in 1970. Portnoy's Complaint was published in 1969. I started to read these books by men talking about their inner lives, cutting open their brains and showing their sexual fantasies. And I thought, I could do that from a woman's point of view. It would be different, but it would show the other side of humanity and the way women think. So very much it was the change in the laws that permitted a series of very important court cases, which I won't go into here, but that made it possible for us to write about a side of life that has motivated people for centuries, i.e. the sexual side of life, and suddenly we could write about it. And that is why Fear of Flying was published in 1973.
Well,
Erica,
I want to finish. I mean, you simply can't compare the US monitoring on the internet with Mao's kind of control. I mean, I think the basic ingredients with the Mao's control, to some extent, which is still there in China today, is the accompanying terror. And what's going to happen to you if the government knows what you are writing? Well, it'd be Mao's time. I mean, you know what? You probably everybody here knows that. I mean, you know, you get cast to the gulags, you get executed, all your letters. You know, we don't need even to compare to Mao's time. I mean, even today, I mean, the Chinese internet is not just being monitored. People can be sent to prison for what they wrote, not for what they write, not because of they're terrorists, but because their opinions. And of course, what the internet control in China is doing is they can delete. I mean, my books. I mean, I know this for certain because my books. There are many versions on the internet initially, but they have all been deleted. And of course, there are also pirate editions. I mean, in my case, I know I welcome pirate editions. People can be put into prison. And I myself, I sat in front of a computer in London, and I saw a comment on my biography. And then suddenly a box appeared, and it says, this item is subject to editorial examination. And a second later, the whole thing disappeared. So there is a difference.
I'm not saying that it's comparable in degree. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that once the means exist for surveillance, sooner or later they're used. Just as once people build certain kinds of weapons, sooner or later they find an excuse to use them.
Well, that's not true. We have 1984.
Well, it can be true. We don't know yet if somebody will release an
Okay, 1 minute.
animal, I'm either by
Okay,
mistake
okay, we've got to have another question now.
Yeah.
Yes, that hand shot up very quickly. Another lady.
I wanted to bring the conversation back to writing and
Just ask the question.
I was wondering, how do you see, you all worked as writers for a really long time. How has publishing changed in the last 30, 40 years? Is it different now to publish a book compared to 30 years ago?
Has publishing changed, Erica?
The question puts me to sleep.
Yes.
Publishing has changed actually drastically. When I first published, publishers used to publish poetry and biography. They don't anymore. If you have a biography or a book of poems, you go to university press. I was first published as a poet in 1971 and 1973. The commercial publishers have given up every pretense of being preservers of our cultural heritage. They give the most money to television performers who, get naked on the internet, and poetry can go hang itself.
But they give a lot of money to people who write books with lots and lots of sex in it.
No, not really. Not really. If you're a literary writer and you don't turn out the same sausage every time, they're quite suspicious of you. They like to read reports on how many copies each book sold. That is absolutely, it has become much more commercial, but the publishers in America, at least, are so frightened of digital books that, and they don't know whither, and when it's going where, that they use it as an excuse to do nothing, okay? So it's gotten much, much harder to publish good books. However, I believe that human beings are storytelling creatures, and we understand our lives through narrative. And whether we're sitting in a cave telling each other stories, whether we're Aesop making up fables, if he ever existed, or whether we're reading a book on a digital device, or a paper device, or a scroll, I think we are narrative-making creatures, and we like to tell stories, and I don't think it matters a whit or a jottle whether we do it on paper or digitized, and I think everybody's in a fit about it, and it's really a non-issue to me.
Publishing, has it changed?
I have nothing fresh to contribute. So.
Well, because it takes you 12 years to write a book.
That's also true, yes.
All right, that was a reasonably good question, but you won't win the book.
I think publishing has changed enormously, and it's much more difficult, as Erica says, for lots of small writers young writers to begin. It's much harder. Publishing may have become more commercial, but that's because publishing, as we knew it and as we grew up with it, and that was a golden age of publishing as far as I'm concerned, has gone. And it's gone because of the digital world, and publishers are frightened. Of course they're frightened of e-books, and they're frightened above all of Amazon. And my great fear is that in 20 years' time, the only publisher will be Amazon. I think that's a really, I hope I'm wrong.
One minute.
Walking through this.
One at a time. One at a time.
Publishers are publishing book on e-book as well.
Yes.
I know for my case, and others, my publishers are publishing the e-book simultaneously.
Yes.
So
maybe let's hope it's all right.
And by the way, they're making a fortune, but they tell the writers they're not.
All right, okay. Victor Chu. Don't look round, you are Victor. We need a microphone.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Private letters have been the main source for biographies in the past, but people are writing less and less letters in favor of emails. How would biographiers, how would that impact if you were to write the biography in 10, 20 years' time?
It's going to be much, much more difficult. I mean, for example, just to harp on, if you forgive me for a second, about the royal family. Prince Charles writes long, long letters like his grandmother did, but his son, Prince William, is never, I don't believe writes letters at all. He sends emails and texts. And that's going to be impossible for biographers, and it's going to be a huge loss, not just in the royal family, but everywhere. I think the letters have been crucial to us, and it's going to be very hard to trace texts and emails in the same way.
But are we not hearing that all our emails have been
out your emails, you autograph them, and you keep them in a file.
In fact, you can never get rid of whatever you write. That's the frightening thing. You can delete as much as you want, but actually,
that's right.
It's always cyberspace in perpetuity.
When emails began, whatever it was 20 years ago, I said to an American friend of mine, it's really rather a wonderful, new, flirtatious, romantic medium, isn't it? You can communicate rather lovely thoughts. And he said, William, you must be insane. I would not write in an email any words that I did not wish to appear on my tombstone. Very good advice.
All right. Yes, there's several. No, that board man will have to wait a minute. How about this woman with the flaming hair? Yes, the blonde with huge mane.
Do you think that exile, whether self-imposed or not, provides the best environment or the best sort of manure for the fields of a writer's imagination?
Jong, exile.
Me. And well, I think not necessarily. There are great writers in China who writes and who needs the soil to write. And I feel if I was in China, but still, I would still be writing, but of course, provided that I can write without getting into terrible trouble. I don't think exile is a necessary ingredient for writing, but it's also true. It's also with music. Yeah, I mean, there is exile does bring out a certain sentiment, a certain yearning, a certain homesickness, certain things that adds a certain dimension to writing.
We can go back to James Joyce, who could never be published in his own country, who was banned and burned in his own country, who lived in Paris, who lived in Trieste. I think that we've seen that exile sometimes is great inspiration for writing.
Really?
Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I think some writers feel they need to be nourished by their own lands and customs, so I think it's can be both.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, other things like the tango was invented in Argentina by the low classes, sneered at by the bourgeoisie and the upper classes, but when it became very famous in Paris,